Aha.
Recording in progress.
Cool. All right, there you are.
All right.
Let's see, I'm gonna change me to speaker. And get my own stuff on. All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. You're pretty quiet. You have a volume button you can turn up or anything?
Is that better?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
How are you, man?
Doing all right. How about you?
It's Monday morning. What can I say? I'm a structural engineer by trade. I do structural inspections, and I looked at my week this week and I'm like, man, not much in the way of the inspections going on, but I've got a lot of interviews, so I guess I know what way I'm being directed.
Cool.
Yeah. So before we get started, I guess manalizing, I don't know how much research you may or may not have done, but I like that a light and dark on your face. One side of you is light and the other side is pretty dark. That's actually what I did on my like logo.
Oh, cool.
But manalizing is a podcast about all the crap that we men deal with and do to ourselves. From my point of view, if a woman's got an issue, she's got 30 girlfriends to go talk to.
Right.
And if a man's got an issue, he's got nobody. If he's lucky, maybe one person, and maybe you can talk to that person. But usually when we talk to somebody, it's about football.
Mm-hmm.
And the suicide rate among dudes is about 4 times higher than women. And there's a reason for that. And that's because we all suck at getting our stuff dealt with. We think we can solve any problem, and perhaps we can, but not if it's our own. So, what's your motivation for coming on?
Well, you said you're looking for guys who've dealt with a lot of the father's rights issues and things like that. I'm happy to share my story if it helps the next guy.
And that's exactly what I'm looking for. As you're doing that, be aware, I'm less interested in the story and more interested in what it did to you on your insides, to your gut, to your brain, to your soul.
Okay.
And, because that's the kind of stuff that causes, suicides. Is the kind of stuff that causes, failed marriages, failed relationships with kids. It's the kind of stuff that causes people to go postal, and our goal is to eliminate as much postal as possible.
Yeah.
So, let's get started. Mark, I know nothing about you. Here's what I know about you, Mark. Your name is Mark. You're wearing a purple, looks like either a hoodie or a t-shirt, and you're a member of a father's rights group. That's what I know about you.
Okay.
You and I go back about 1 minute. So it's not like we've been best friends for 1,000 years.
Well, yeah. But
yeah, tell me more about you. Let's start when you were little. What would you care? Where first off, where do you live presently? Where did you grow up? Who's Mark?
I grew up in Eastern North Carolina, Rocky Mount, which is a tiny little town. And I'm currently living in a suburb of Raleigh called Nightdale.
Uh-huh.
I'm 43 years old. I'm disabled combat veteran. I spent time in Iraq as a combat medic, and I'm a dad to 4 kids. And
that gives you plenty of mileage on your body and your soul.
Yeah.
You've probably got the PTSD that you probably can't talk about, or can you? Let's go to your military experience.
Um, you know, I spent 8 years in the reserves.
Uh-huh.
I was deployed for 17 months. Spent 13 months in combat. I was in Solder City. Uh,
Solder City.
yeah, it's one of the areas in Baghdad, and I got moved around Iraq a lot, and you could if you look at the map, the little triangle of death, that's where I used to hang out.
Yeah. Yeah. You're the triangle of death guy.
Yeah,
And and I'm pretty sure you didn't die, but I'm sure there are stories you can tell or
yeah.
can't, as the case may be.
Well, I came back. I served as a combat medic my entire time. That was what I went in to do. That's what I wanted to do. And I came back, and immediately I was pulled as we were out processing. Um, when we out process, you go to a big gym, and you go basically table to table to table. Uh, they had given us new uniforms when we got back, but they didn't give us new boots. And the lady at the psych table happened to notice my boots had a bunch of caked on blood. And she pulled me out, and she was like, "Hey, you know, I see your boots. And she asked me a few questions, and I was like, "Yeah, as a medic, I spent a lot of time doing my job because I was a field medic, a combat medic. I went out with the guys." And she sent me over to psych, and immediately they got me arranged for me to be in contact with the VA. And from there, I got uh, diagnosed with PTSD. And that diagnosis ran for about 10 years by itself until they discovered I had a traumatic brain injury too from one of the IEDs. Um, the whole time I have been pretty open about it because I see all these guys that I served with that I would give my life for struggling with the same things I'm struggling with. And if I'm not willing to speak up from them by sharing my story, they're more prone to suicide. And I mean, even today, like I got a call about 2 weeks ago from one of the guys I served with, and he was struggling with drugs. And we talked about it for a little bit. And, I set him up with what services I could. But it's my way of giving back is speaking out.
Right.
About-
Your way of giving back is speaking out. Yeah. I caked with blood. How many missions would you say, or did you end up coming back with blood on your boots or on your uniform?
Um, a lot. There were sometimes I was out in the desert for 6 weeks at a time, and that would count as one mission. But there are other times that when we were in urban areas, I was running 3 missions a day, and two of those I'd come back with blood on me. And it wasn't always like our guys. My responsibility was to treat our guys, the enemy, and civilians. So
In is that in that order, or did it matter?
it didn't matter. I mean, if you came to me hurt, I was going to treat you. And I mean, granted, our guys got precedence, but most of the time it was easy enough to triage.
Uh,
So
yeah. Yeah. I don't know what kind of rounds they use there. I don't know if it's a 223 or if it's a bigger round than that, but I would imagine one of those hits your body. That's going to make a hole.
yeah, a lot of what I treated was shrapnel
Mm-hmm.
more so than bullet wounds, but they use mainly AKs with 7.62 rounds.
Uh-huh.
And those do make quite a big, quite a hole.
Yes, they do. And it was your job to how many of you medics are there in a I don't know the lingo, the squad that you were with?
My unit had approximately 130 people. Out of that, we had 5 medics. Uh, as we progressed, we had 3 medics actually drop out of the missions due to basically they just couldn't handle it.
Couldn't
And
handle the blood, the pain, the gore.
yeah, and they found their ways out. Whether it was uh, essentially faking illnesses for 2 of them,
Hmm.
and then another one, he went home for leave because he had some family issues to take care of, and then he went AWOL, and he was gone for, I think it was like 2 months until the police found him, and he got a plane ticket back, and they wouldn't let him be a medic after that. They're
Yeah.
like, you're unreliable. So
Was
it got down to 2 of us.
Does it so that just increased the load on the remaining guys
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
and more blood on your boots.
Yeah.
Yeah, that has to have resulted in a lot of memories. How did that affect you uh right after you got home, and what's it doing to you now?
When I first came home, I started drinking and partying, and I mean, I was 25 years old and I had just survived war. I was ecstatic in my, ecstatic in my own way, but I was drinking to cope
Right.
because I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't, you know, I was not functioning at all. And
What does not functioning look like?
it basically, like, I would get up and kind of just with blinders on, make it through the day until I could get to the night and drink because I did not want to go to sleep sober.
What did the drinking do for you?
It it essentially made me pass out so I wouldn't dream. And because I would always dream about the stuff we went through. And there was this little old lady that worked at the VA. Her name was Susan. She was like a grandma, but she kept calling me. And finally one day I answered. And she was like, you know, we talked for a while and she's like, why don't you come in? I was like, okay. So I started going in, and that's when I got diagnosed with PTSD. And I stopped drinking, at least for a little while. And they tried all kinds of drugs. So basically, I traded one drug for another.
Right.
And just during that time, I moved, I think, 4 times, just bouncing from couch to couch. And it just, I tried to go back to school to finish college, and I struggled. And I kept assuming that part was the PTSD, but you know, I finally it was really weird. My girlfriend at the time and my brother were both hounding me to get a dog, and I said, no, I don't want a dog because it'll be my responsibility. And then they said, well, come on, come on. And I was like, okay, you know what? If we can find an adult dog that's well behaved, potty trained, all of that, I'll agree to it. The next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang.
Somebody's got a dog for you.
Yeah, it's my best friend. He's like, hey, uh, I'm getting divorced, man. And, I knew his relationship was on the ropes, but that night they had decided. He's like, I've got to move out and I can't take Daisy with me. And little pit bull mix. And she was always a sweet dog. I was like,
Right. Pit
yeah,
bulls can be great dogs.
yeah. But I was like, I just said this, so I kind of have to go with it.
Uh-huh.
And I picked Daisy up about a week later, and everybody was like, "Hey, there's something about you and that dog," because I wasn't leaving the house much, and now I had to take the dog out for walks and that kind of thing, and it was helping me reintegrate. And about that time, I ran into another vet, and he's like, "Hey, have you tried the vet center?" I was like, "No, what's that?" And the vet center is an offshoot of the VA, and it's strictly for combat vets and military sexual trauma victims. But I went and checked into the vet center and started getting therapy through them. The the one-on-one was really good, but then I got placed in a group therapy. And I attribute that with saving my life, because I went in there the first day, and this Vietnam vet walked up to me and put his arm around me. He's like, "Hey, you're drinking, you're doing drugs, you're chasing women, you're trying to destroy yourself in slow motion."
He knew that just by walking up to you.
Yeah. And I was like stunned that this man knew all this about me,
Right.
because I had literally just walked in the door. And I looked at him, I was like, how do you know this? He's like, "Brother, we've been doing this for 40 years. You know, we've got you. We will help you get through this." And you know, it was an amazing experience to get into a group of men that knew what I'd been through. I could openly share what I was going through, and they understood. They didn't judge. They didn't, you know, like I had one therapist who quit because I started opening up about some of the experiences, and she couldn't handle what I'd been through.
The therapist couldn't handle what you told her in
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah, she's like, I just can't do it. I'm sorry. You know, my son's in the military, and it's just too much for me. You know, I'll get you somebody else. I was like, okay, sorry.
Wow.
uh,
Okay.
but, you know, that meeting those guys really turned my life around. And later on, Daisy, the pit bull, became my service dog. And
Uh-huh.
you know, I've still got her. She doesn't function like a service dog anymore. She's 18, 19 years old. So, you
She
know,
must be I was gonna say she must be a smaller dog to be that old, but she's pit bull.
yeah, she's about 50 pounds,
Uh-huh.
but she still roughhouses with the other dogs. But, you know, her days of running and walking real far are gone.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, at the end of this interview, I'd like to meet Daisy.
okay.
But so let me go off on a tangent. Last night, because I'm the structural guy, I dreamed that somehow I put this massive multi-level parking garage on the back of my house, which is funny because I don't have a backyard. I've got about 15 feet of backyard, and then there's some lake. But somehow I put this massive parking garage, and then I invited about 1,000 of my favorite friends and their cars onto the parking garage. And next thing I noticed, there was a structural crack in one of the corners. And it had actually fallen down about a half inch.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Oh, this is a structural failure on day one, and I did it, and so the only person I can sue is me." Uh, that's what nightmares are for
Yeah.
me. You know where I'm going with this. You know, if to the extent that you can do it, what are nightmares for you?
Um, One particular nightmare that I have is I walk out, you know, I wake up, I walk out into my den, And sitting on the couch is this Iraqi woman that her I treated her daughter, I treated her husband because they were driving down the road and they had the bad idea of trying to pass a military convoy. Um, in the convoy were Air Force, uh, basically Air Force airmen that had been tasked with security for some of these civilian vehicles that were in it. And I can't fault the kid. He was young and scared and fresh into Iraq,
Mhm.
and he lit their car up with an M16, and we just happened to be in the area, so I responded. But the mom had shielded the daughter 16ish, but she had shielded the daughter as any parent's going to do. But the mom got shot through the hand, and as the daughter was the worst one out of it. So I was trying to keep the daughter alive. I was like, you two are going to be the parents, you guys are going to be okay. Like, yeah, you're messy right now, but just give me a second. And I was treating the daughter and the mom just kept touching me with that hand. And I don't know why it like stayed with me so much, but like in my nightmares, I see this mom and she's just like in the house doing normal stuff, but she's got this big gaping hole in her hand still. I'm like, and it just messes with me because I'm like, I don't want those worlds of my life with my kids and my wife to mingle with the brutality of war. And that kind of is like the psychological part of the nightmares, and
Right.
that's worse than the ones of dealing with screaming patients because that I can logic through.
Right. Yeah, you said that the guys at at- should we call it the VA? What was that organization saved your life?
Yeah, yeah. The vet center guys definitely have saved my life,
I
and
have a my son has a fairly close friend who is former Army Ranger.
mhm,
I might be getting that wrong. He might be Green Beret, but elevated military.
right.
And he had a gun store, and it was doing very well. I bought a lot of I bought my AR there. I got a lot of ammo there. Got some other stuff there. He was doing well.
Mhm,
Hung himself a couple of weeks ago.
yeah.
Uh, you have managed to avoid doing that. You have something that he didn't have. What is that?
I think I've got. I mean, I can't speak for him, but I have a purpose because I'm still out here taking care of my kids. I'm still out here fighting for other vets. And on top of that, I've got a great support system of other vets who I can lean on.
Uh huh.
And I think that for a lot of veterans, when we come back, you know, we just went through this huge life changing experience, but we went through it with people that become a family. And overnight, this family kind of drifts apart. And
Right.
everybody says, hey, let's stay in touch. But typically, the first little bit, you don't want to stay in touch because it digs up those memories, those feelings.
You
But
want to
you're
put those away.
right. And that camaraderie gets put away with those feelings. So you get really isolated, you get really depressed because you don't have a mission. And that's one thing that I think veterans, but guys in general, we need to have is a purpose more so than I get up, I go to work, I come home, I sit in front of the TV.
Rinse and repeat. Yeah, I've been there and done that too. Especially when I was about your age, I was like, what's the purpose of all this? I'm getting up, I'm doing my commute, I'm doing the boring job, I fight my way through traffic to get home, and then I fritter away, I eat dinner, go to sleep over and over and over again. Where's the meaning? Where's the value? Why am I doing this?
Hmm.
And yeah, I had my own time of planning out my own suicide.
Yeah,
Eh,
I think.
Um, and I'm thinking that probably what those guys, they would have been there for you at the drop of a hat if you were to go to any of them and say, "Hey, I need this."
Hmm.
Uh, did you do that, or and I guess in your case, you went to a different group of guys and they saved your butt. Is that true?
Yeah, very, very true. And I mean, for me, I know that the guys from my unit have my back 100%, but my role has always been to help them. So
Oh,
it's hard to flip that role. And some of them we're really close on a personal level, and we can talk about this stuff. But it still doesn't change that dynamic 100%. But being able to just go into the VA and the vet centers cold and say, "This is this is where I'm at," and there have a group of men who are ready to just go, "Okay, we got you," and being able to not only have them help me, but help them and their issues too.
yeah. Why? I think I know the answer to this already, but why is that hard to go in there and say, "Hey, help me"?
I mean, uh, all our lives as guys, we're told, be strong, be independent. You know, these are the values that make you important as a man. And this is what makes you essentially valuable to society. But when you're needing help, it makes it so much harder to be humble and say, "Hey, I don't know what to do here. This isn't just I'm putting together something and I need to watch a YouTube. This is I'm lost and I need a mentor." And I think one thing that we've given up over the years is having the older generation as a mentor for the younger.
I'm going to say having anybody be a mentor for anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those Vietnam vets, they've got some years on them by now. They're older than me, but they have been through some rugged stuff. So I think as former military, you can trust and respect them and respect their advice.
Yeah.
What is
And,
it? Go ahead.
go, oh, I was just gonna say it's I lost my dad 12 years ago, I think it is now. But and I don't have any uncles, but essentially these guys have kind of filled in that role of being essentially surrogate dads and surrogate uncles to help guide me and help me navigate a lot of this.
Yeah. And that's it. Yeah, I was going to, my next question would be, how has that helped you? But we already know it saved your life.
Yeah, 100%.
What, what did it feel like before you went in there? What was going on in your mind and your gut and your soul before you met those guys when putting an end to it all was an option? What did that look and feel like?
Uh, I mean, it's everything else felt out of control, but the thought of killing myself, in the darkest times, that was the one thing that I could control.
How so?
because that was on my terms. You know, everywhere else it felt like chaos. And that was the one place that I felt, hey, I can control this. This is 100% me. It's not the medication from the VA. It's not the nightmares. It's not the bad relationship that I got in. It's none of that. It's just me on my own terms.
So it
And
kind of felt, I'm going to say, powerful to you that you could own that, have that be your choice and yours alone. And
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I, I'd be lying if I said that as soon as I walked into the vet center, everything got better.
uh,
It was a roller coaster. And I mean, that's how healing always is. It's never a straight line. But, it since 2008, I haven't had any of those ideations of suicide because things have gotten better and better and better.
right.
Even when things haven't been better, as far as like situationally, going through the divorce, going through family courts, going through my dad's cancer, all of that, you know, never put me back that far to thinking about suicide because I've been able to gain perspective and I feel like I've gained control back over myself in my life.
Yeah, I'm going to say that going through a divorce and going through a loved one's cancer is about as difficult as life can get. Um, and for that, you say that didn't put you back as far as you had been
Yeah.
when you were just marked with post-war PTSD.
Mhm.
Dang. Um, what did that look like with your wife going through the divorce? And I would imagine that your wife, you were a fairly damaged individual, and your wife dealt with it for however long she did, and I'm sure she has her own damage. Um, what did that look like for you? Mostly, what did it feel like uh, as you're going through the divorce? I guess before I have you answer that, I'll tell you how it felt for me. I left and I went from a house, decent sized house, with a bunch of screamy, bouncy, noisy kids and interactions all the time, everywhere, and messes and noise and relationships and talking. And even if it was clean up the house, it was at least you were talking to somebody.
Mhm.
And then I go to this little basement apartment where it's one bedroom, one small kitchen slash living room that's combined, and that's about the whole thing. And it was quiet. There was nobody talking. It was just stony, deadly silent. And I could turn on the radio or turn on the TV, and it didn't change the fact that there was nobody in the room.
Mhm.
And the silence killed me.
Yeah.
Uh, that's my experience. What did yours look like?
Um, my relationship with my ex-wife was really toxic.
Uh huh.
Um, we basically everything ended up being my fault, no matter if it was or not.
Uh huh.
Uh, oh, you disappeared.
Oh, I know what to do about that.
There you are. But you know, a lot of people in my life were like, "Hey, this is not a good relationship for you,"
Uh huh.
and it took a long time for me to realize that. And when I realized it, that's when I asked her for the divorce and everything. And um, you know, basically, once we got to family court, uh, my PTSD, everything was used against me, even though, it had never affected my kid or my parenting. And the only thing it had done is allowed me to be a stay-at-home dad. And that
Right.
was taken from me. And I know exactly what you're describing of the silence, because when my son wasn't here, when he wasn't with me, it was just horrible. But I took that time because once I started seeing how many other guys go through the same thing of just becoming a secondary parent, I took that time and used it to find myself again. And I started doing the things that I loved to do before I got into the relationship. And you know before I was constantly told, oh, you're a monster, you're just horrible, you're stupid, like all that nasty stuff that used to be said to me was suddenly gone. And I was like, whoa, hold on. I Yeah, I went through some rough times, but I'm a good person. And it took me a while to figure it out. But then I started, like, I got a gazetteer, which is kind of like a mini atlas of the state. I
Right.
was like, oh well, I've never been here. And I would just, when my son was with my ex-wife, I'd go on a fishing trip, or I'd go to a museum there and just kind of reconnect. And um
I'm going to say get to know yourself a little.
yeah, and I got involved with an organization called the Joel Fund, which is a veterans organization, and they offer art classes. And I started these writing classes, blacksmithing classes, and I I've started painting again. And my ex-wife always told me, she's like, I'm the creative one, not you. And yeah, and stupid me, I believed it.
Yeah.
So, like, for the longest time, like, I didn't do anything creative. But next month I'm going to be in an art show.
Nice. What flavor of art are you doing?
I'm, they're going to have three of my paintings and one of my poems.
Nice.
So yeah,
That's that's awesome.
yeah. And
Uh,
I'm actually getting interviewed for the Joel Fund on Friday, and they'll be doing showing one of my digital stories with that.
Nice.
So
Digital. What's a digital story?
uh it's essentially basically a fancy name for a fancier slideshow. But
Okay. Got
yeah,
it.
I've
The
done.
so what would you say is the single most difficult moment of your life that you're willing to talk about?
mm, the worst moment of my life is I I asked my ex-wife for a divorce on a Wednesday. And that Friday we had a couples counseling appointment. And we went in there and we talked, and I was like, look, I just don't see us working, but I need us to get to a point where we can communicate and co-parent. Um, we left there, we went to lunch with my mom, and it wasn't great, but we were amiable.
Hmm.
Um, then uh, I was like, hey, I had plans to stop and pick up a few things that we needed at the house at the store. And my ex-wife took my son with her and was like, hey, I'll take him on home and we'll meet you there. I took maybe an hour to get home. And when I got home, nobody was there. I waited and waited, and I called my brother. I was like, hey, something's weird going on here. It's been a couple of hours. She's not answering her phone. She's not answering texts. You know, she and Arthur aren't home. And uh, he was like, well, this was about 5 o'clock in the evening. And he was like, well, I'll come on by and we'll see what we can figure out. He came by and about 7 o'clock, he he's an attorney. He was like, "Go ahead and call the sheriff. Uh, if something's weird going on." So the sheriff came out and they started a missing persons report. And that entire weekend, I didn't know what was going on. My ex-wife and my son were gone, and I didn't know if they were alive. I didn't know anything. That Monday, um, I went to my attorney's office to because I'd already started the process of the divorce, and I was scheduled to go in anyway. And I told them everything that was going on, and they're like, "Well, okay." And I got a call while I was sitting there, and the call was from the chief of police that I had gone to before because I was, I was worried about the situation. So about a year before the divorce started, I had gone and talked to him, been like, look, she's gotten physical with me. I'm just trying to get her help at this point. But I just want to know that there's a safe place for me to get my son if things get out of hand. Because she's a bigger woman and I know exactly what would happen if I tried to defend myself.
Hmm.
And he called me. He's like, hey, just want to let you know, uh, your your ex-wife has filed papers saying that you're abusive.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. My attorney's like, oh, that's the silver bullet. I was like, what? They're like, yeah, yeah. That basically this is how people go about getting custody. So, I paid extra money to defend myself against that and to start the emergency custody stuff. And but I mean that entire weekend and being kicked out of my house for 2 weeks was just horrible. And on top of that, I had to leave. I had 4 dogs at the time, and I could take Daisy with me because she's my service dog. But the other three, I had to leave there. And I was told by the deputies my ex-wife had plans to come get them. She was going to take care of them. I said, okay, hey, as long as they're being taken care of, you know. Uh, I think it was about 36 hours later. I got a call from a neighbor, and the dogs had not. My ex-wife hadn't come back. The dogs hadn't been let out. Um, and I had to call the sheriff's office, have them go out there with my brother, and he got them and put them in a kennel. But they completely destroyed the house, like torn the doors open, like
This is your former house.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean that entire week was probably the worst time of my life. But not knowing if my son was alive or dead that first weekend was the roughest. I mean, I would have rather been in combat anytime than not know what was going on.
And be away from your home. Yeah. You'd be away from your son.
Yeah.
And, you'd, even if she'd gotten in a car accident, you'd still grieve her.
Yeah.
Uh, Especially if your son was in that same car.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, uh, we still have it's not a good relationship. You
Mhm.
know, I try to co-parent, and it feels like everything gets turned on against me. But with everything that's happened, and granted, the she left in 2018 is when all this started. If something were to happen to her, I would still grieve for my son's sake
Right.
because I know that would hurt him.
Right.
But
Yeah. So that weekend was your darkest moment. Uh, here's the toughest question I've got. How
okay.
did that darkest moment, why was that a blessing to you? How did it help you moving forward?
I mean, one thing that I have gained from that moment and moving forward with the family courts and everything
Uh-huh.
is, I as a stay-at-home dad, I was there from the time he got up to the time he went to bed. I was the one getting up with him in the middle of the night, the whole 9 yards.
Uh-huh.
And there were times I was like, man, I just really want to break. But seeing how impermanent and just easy for that structure to be lost, it's made me cherish being a dad so much more. And anytime, I'm remarried now, and we've got a blended family. I have one stepson, and there's my son from my previous marriage, and we have two little ones. And there's times I'm just like, wow, this is a lot. But then I stop and think, like, I'm amazingly blessed to be in the middle of this. I could have not made it out of Iraq. My son could have been killed while he was with his my ex-wife. You know, anything could happen. But right now, in the middle of all of this, it's good. You know.
This is what you were hoping for. I told you the beginning of that story of when I was in that empty, silent, small apartment.
Hmm.
And the lady upstairs, she told me that, whenever we're being too noisy upstairs, just hit the ceiling with a broomstick, and that'll be our signal that we're being too noisy and we need to quiet it down.
Hmm.
And honestly, the highlight of my days was when they would sit down to dinner directly above my head, and I could hear chairs move and I could hear a little bit of chatter, and I knew that they were having the moment that I was not.
Hmm.
Um, and that I so badly wished for.
Yeah.
And last thing I was going to do is hit the ceiling with a broomstick to stop that, because that was my highlight.
Hmm.
And I think what I'm hearing from you is very similar. Now you've got four munchkins, and you're having all of that craziness going on in your house, and you're like, this is really hard, but it's also kind of super awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's being a dad is one of the biggest blessings in the world. And even on those days when you're getting puked on and you got crap on you, and you're just like, oh, there, I still take a moment and I'm like, hey, you know what? It's good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you play super dad, and the wife goes off and makes a nickel, I presume.
Yeah, she works with the state parks. She uh basically trains rangers for programs, and she does programs herself.
Okay. Um, yeah, one of the things that I run into occasionally with men is we feel like if the wife out earns us, then we feel like we've lost a chunk of our man card. Does that ever happen to you?
Not really. Um, I mean, we make about the same,
Uh-huh.
but looking at the cost of childcare and all of that,
Hmm.
it's we basically, if I went to work, I'd be paying for somebody else to just watch the kids.
Right. And that's expensive.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, I'm happy that I get to be involved with the kids' lives because
Uh-huh.
I'm growing up, my dad, he worked for the government and he would be gone, a week or sometimes more. And he always made time for us, but at the same time, it was like I wanted him more than he could be there. And I'm happy to be able to be this kind of rock for my kids.
Yeah. I guess that's one step above what I consider to be the worst case is the kid who doesn't care if dad's at home, or even worse, is glad when dad's not home.
Yeah.
But I think you recognized from growing up that it's important to you to have dad home. So you're I'm sure drawing a good deal of value from the fact that you're dad and you're home.
Yeah. And I don't know if you can hear, but the littlest one's giving my wife a hard time right now. So,
I did hear something in the background for one half of a moment.
yeah.
Um,
There's certain things I can't do that she can, so she's probably feeding him.
yeah, that's awesome. Uh, let's meet your dog.
All right, let me go get her.
All right.
All right, buddy.
Yeah, that is an old doggy.
Yeah, she doesn't handle the stairs quite as well as she used to.
Yeah. She's like, what are you doing to me?
Yeah.
I can see some silver on her muzzle.
Yeah.
The it, I've always told people, my dog died a couple of years ago, and since then I've always told people I love all dogs as long as they're not mine.
Mhm.
It's dogs are awesome. So that dog is your service animal.
Yeah.
What happens when this dog passes?
Um, at this point, I'm handling things pretty well,
Uh-huh.
so I don't really use her. Well, I can't use her anymore. But I've trained other ones for other guys,
Uh-huh.
but I've got another one I could train, but I really don't see the benefit of it at this point.
Right. You're good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So how old are you?
43.
43. So 43-year-old Mark, he gets a DeLorean. Turns out it's a time machine. You get to go back to either the 39-year-old Mark and talk to him, or you get to go back to maybe Iraq and talk to that Mark. Which one are you going to talk to, and what are you going to tell him?
That's hard to say because all the mistakes I've made along the way have brought me here. I think, if I had to pick one, it would probably be the Iraq War one.
Uh-huh.
Just because right before we came home, the unit replacing us had a master sergeant. He was an older guy, and he'd already, been to combat and everything. And he pulled myself and the other medic aside, and he was like, "Look, this the war was the easy part. Going home, that's the hard part." And I remember sitting in the tent later with my partner, and just we were kind of like, whatever, we're going home. Like, we've survived. We made it. And you know, he was right. He was absolutely right. And I think I would tell myself, hey, believe him. Like, pay attention to what he's saying, because this man, he's walked in our shoes. He knows what's going to happen. Like, just brace yourself and get ready for a really rocky road.
Yeah. And you've recognized that, and at some point, and then you've allowed yourself to be healed. And of
Mhm.
course, healing will never be perfect, and it'll never be complete, I'm sure. But you've also allowed yourself to become the healer,
Yeah,
and I'm sure that's also part of your healing. Uh, Thank you for your service.
I appreciate that. I really do.
All right, I think I'll cut it off there. Um, do you, unless there's something that I missed that you feel like we need to talk about?
No, I think that's good.
Did we cover the stuff that you wanted to cover when you volunteered for this?
Yeah, I think so. I had no real expectations one way or the other. Just, feel like if my story helps somebody else.
Well, you've said a number of things. I was just talking yesterday about how I've interviewed a number of guys, but never a vet, not yet. And I'm sure I'll be interviewing vets in the future. Actually, I interviewed a guy who was a former cop, and that was kind of like a war. He was a cop in Oakland,
Oh, wow.
and he was he was responsible for drugs, prostitution, and human trafficking.
Jesus.
Uh, and yeah, he's got some PTSD, and I've interviewed him, but never a vet directly. And so you said a lot of things that I was hoping to get recorded. And what I'm looking for is guys who have the recipe for getting past the hard stuff, and you've got that, and you described it. I mean, an hour format is never going to solve all problems, but you said enough to give guys hope and some direction, and so that's awesome. I'm glad to have you on.
Cool. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh, if you want, if there's an organization or maybe your paintings that you want to plug, we can throw a blurb about that in.
Okay. Yeah. I'll send you email just to essentially with the vet center information and
Uh-huh.
with the Joel Fund information.
Do you have that on the top of your head right now?
I got my computer right here. I can.
Okay, yeah, look it up, and then we'll just add this little bit of recording so that guys have it and they don't have to go anywhere else.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So
Okay,
the
let me set this up. Okay, Mark. So you mentioned a couple of assets that were available for vets. Did you say Joel Center?
the Joel Fund.
Is that
It's
JOE or JOEL?
JOEL.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a organization that does a whole lot with the veteran community,
Uh-huh.
but their main thing is art classes and helping vets, find find a voice to help them heal.
Right.
And
That's the joelfund.com.
.org.
.org.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the other one?
The other one is called Vet Centers, and it's specifically for combat veterans and military sexual trauma.
Uh-huh.
But the VA manages them, but they're an offshoot.
Right.
Their website is vetcenter.va.gov, and they're all over the country. You just look it up, and I've had a lot more success with them than I have with the mainstream VA.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'll throw that in.
Okay.
I'll find a place to put that.
Okay, cool.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you very much. What I intend to do, here's how the process works next, is I get this whole raw video to
Mhm.
one employee who goes through and she finds the cuts and the highlights.
Mhm.
And then she sends that back to me. I do the cuts and the highlights, and once that's done, I will send the video up to a different YouTube channel.
Okay.
And then with the highlights, I will use those on Instagram. Usually there's about a half dozen ish
Okay.
to promote the podcast. And I will, because you and I met on this Father's Rights group, I'll
Mhm.
post some of those there as well.
Cool.
And that will be your cue to just let your network know about the podcast as well, and you can use these highlights as a way to do that.
Okay, cool, man. Appreciate that.
And yeah, that's how it works. We're way behind on the editing. I've got about 16 of these done, and we're just this week we're starting on promoting the first one. So it's going to take a while getting caught up as far as the promotions are concerned. Don't be surprised if it takes a couple of months before we get your stuff up.
Okay, no worries.
But that's what to expect moving forward.
Okay, cool. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and there will be manalizing groups in the future. I would imagine some of them are going to be military related. If you'd like to lead one of those groups or be in them, we are not set up for that yet, but I'd love to have you doing.
Okay, yeah, just let me know.
Okay.
I'd
Good
be
meeting
happy.
you, Mark.
Good meeting you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.